She was wearing the wrong shoes for a woman running late. That was the first thing anyone noticed. Not the coat, navy wool, pressed clean, the kind you iron twice because once is never enough for a royal engagement. Not the pearls at her throat, sitting crooked from the taxi ride. Not the way her reading glasses had left two small red marks on either side of her nose, which she hadn't yet had a moment to check in a mirror. The shoes. Flat, brown, sensible in a way that felt almost defiant for a woman who had spent 30 years being photographed from every possible angle, at every possible occasion, in every possible pair of heels that protocol demanded. Camilla, Queen Consort of Great Britain, was speed-walking through Terminal 5 at Heathrow in orthopedic flats, and she looked not regal, not stiff, not the version of herself that appeared on commemorative plates sold in tourist shops along the Thames. She looked like someone's mum trying to catch a flight. Her lady-in-waiting, a precise woman named Dorothea who moved like she'd been engineered for exactly this kind of controlled chaos, was 3 steps behind her, speaking into a phone in a voice that managed to be urgent and completely expressionless at the same time. "We are 4 minutes from the private gate. Yes, 4, I'm aware." Camilla didn't turn around. She knew that voice. 4 minutes meant 2. 2 minutes meant now. She adjusted her grip on the overnight bag herself, a thing that made the nearest protection officer visibly uncomfortable because the bag was supposed to be in his hands, not hers, and she'd simply taken it back at the curb outside without explanation and kept walking. It was a plain bag, canvas, faded green with a broken clasp on the front pocket that she'd been meaning to have fixed for going on 3 years now. It did not look like a bag that belonged to a queen. She knew that was rather the point. The call had come at 6:30 that morning. Not through the usual channels. Not through the palace switchboard. Not through Dorothea's immaculate scheduling system that mapped her days in 15-minute increments, color-coded, laminated, and carried in a leather portfolio that had never once been spilled on. Her personal mobile, the old one, the number she'd had since before everything changed, since before the title and the weight and the specific kind of loneliness that comes with being publicly loved and privately questioned in equal measure. 3 rings, she'd answered on the second. "It's me," said the voice on the other end. "I need you to come." Just that, "I need you to come," as though no time had passed at all, as though they were still the kind of people who could say that to each other without the weight of 100 headlines sitting between the words. She'd been at her dressing table when the call came, halfway through her morning, still holding a cup of tea that had gone cold in her hand. She set it down very carefully on its saucer. "How long do I have?" "The surgery is at noon." She looked at herself in the mirror. Not long. Just a single look, the kind where you're not checking your appearance but checking something else, something underneath. "I'll be there," she said. She hung up. She sat for exactly 45 seconds in the particular silence of a woman deciding. Then she got up and found the green canvas bag. The private security lane at Terminal 5 is not like the public queues. There is no snaking rope barrier, no plastic trays sliding along conveyor belts, no toddler wailing 3 people ahead of you because someone made the mistake of giving him a juice box right before the body scanner. It is quiet, efficient, staffed by officers who have been briefed, who know what they're looking at, who do not ask unnecessary questions. Except that morning, one of them did. His name, according to the badge on his chest, was Officer T. Hadley. Late 20s, broad-shouldered, the kind of careful face that gives nothing away until it does. He'd been on this posting for 8 months. He had, in those 8 months, cleared diplomats, cabinet ministers, 2 members of a boy band who'd been so normal about it that he'd almost felt disappointed, and once, memorably, a former prime minister who'd set off the metal detector 3 times before anyone thought to check the belt buckle. He had never personally been responsible for flagging a bag belonging to a member of the royal family. The scanner flagged it before he did. Not the bag itself. The thing inside it, dense, irregular. The shape on the screen was wrong in a way that wasn't dangerous. He'd been trained to know the difference, and his pulse didn't spike, not exactly, but it was odd. Odd enough to require a hand check. Protocol was protocol regardless of whose bag it was. This was the moment Dorothea materialized at his elbow. "There will be absolutely no need," she began. "Dorothea," Camilla's voice, quiet, not sharp, just final, "let him do his job." Dorothea closed her mouth, a small miracle by most accounts. Camilla set the bag on the inspection table herself and unzipped it. "Go ahead," she said to Officer Hadley. He looked at her. She looked back, not impatient, not imperious, not performing any of the versions of royalty he'd seen on television or in the papers. Just a woman, waiting, tired around the eyes in a way that no amount of money or title protects against. He reached into the bag. The first thing his hand found was entirely expected. A change of clothes rolled tight the way someone packs when they're moving fast. A small toiletry bag. A phone charger wound around itself 3 times. The second thing was a book, well thumbed, spine cracked from being opened flat. A paperback. He turned it over. A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. The kind of novel that people press into other people's hands and say, "This one, you have to read this one," and they always mean it, and the person receiving it almost always means it when they say they will. The third thing was a manila envelope, sealed, thick. He glanced up. "May I?" he asked. Something moved in her face, not resistance, not quite. "Yes," she said, "you may." He opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Old, not digitally printed but developed, the real kind, slightly glossy, with that particular yellowish cast that photographs get when they've been handled many times over many years. 2 girls. A garden somewhere, overexposed, English summer light doing its best. One of the girls was laughing so hard she'd blurred at the edges. The other was looking at the laughing one with an expression that a person would have to live a long time to fully understand. Behind the photograph was a letter, handwritten, several pages. He did not read it. Behind the letter was something else. Small, wrapped in a piece of cloth that had once been blue and was now the soft gray of a thing held too often. He unwrapped it carefully. A bird carved from wood. No bigger than his palm. Simple, not fine craftsmanship, not decorative, the kind of thing made by someone who was learning to make something rather than someone who already knew how. A wing slightly uneven. The head tilted at an angle that was almost, but not quite, right. Officer Hadley held it for a moment. Then he set it down on the table between them. Camilla looked at the bird for a long time. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the fluorescent lights overhead. "My sister made that," she said. "She was 8, I was 10. She gave it to me because she said I was the one who was always flying off somewhere." She picked it up and wrapped it back in its cloth with the particular care of someone who has done this many times. "I'm going to see her," she said. "She goes in for surgery in," she checked her watch, 4 hours and 20 minutes, and I am not going to miss it." Officer Hadley looked at this woman, the shoes, the pearls still sitting crooked, the old canvas bag with the broken clasp, and he did the only thing that felt right. He stepped aside. "Safe travels, ma'am," he said. Camilla picked up her bag. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it the way people only mean things when they're not performing anything at all. She walked through. End of part 1. The flight was 45 minutes. She spent the first 20 of them staring out the window at a sky that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Not quite gray, not quite blue, the particular English in between that she had always found oddly comforting. The kind of sky that makes no promises. Dorothea, seated across the narrow aisle, had produced her portfolio and was working through it with the focused intensity of a woman who processes anxiety through scheduling. The protection officers were doing what protection officers do on aircraft, which is mostly sit very still and look like they are not thinking about anything, which means they are thinking about everything. Camilla read 3 pages of the paperback and then closed it. She unzipped the canvas bag and took out the manila envelope and held it in her lap without opening it. She'd read the letter inside so many times in the past 2 days that she could have recited it from the middle of a dead sleep. She didn't need to read it again. She just needed to hold it. The letter had arrived on Thursday morning. Not an email, not a call, a letter, written on the pale blue stationery that her sister Annabel had used for as long as Camilla could remember, the kind bought in packs from a specific stationer's in Edinburgh that she'd been ordering from since they were girls, and their mother had told them that a person who writes properly is a person worth knowing. Annabel had always taken that more seriously than Camilla had. The handwriting was shakier than it used to be. That was the first thing she noticed. Then she felt guilty for noticing it, and then she read the letter, and by the 3rd paragraph she was sitting on the floor of her private sitting room, not dramatically, not collapsed, just down, the way you sometimes need to be closer to the ground when something is restructuring itself inside your chest. Annabel was 67, 3 years younger. She had spent her whole life being 3 years younger, 3 years steadier, 3 years quieter, 3 years more content with a small life lived fully rather than a large life lived publicly. She had a house in the Scottish borders with a garden that did extraordinary things every May. She had 2 dogs and 1 ex-husband and a circle of friends who'd known her since before she was anything other than herself. She had never once, in all the years of headlines and cameras and the particular circus that Camilla's life had become, said "I told you so." Not once. The letter said, "The doctors are calling it a routine procedure. I want you to know I believe them. I also want you there. Not if you can manage it. I want you there. I haven't said that to anyone in years, so please don't make me say it again." People have a version of her, Camilla had learned. Everyone does. They had spent years building it, first from tabloid photographs taken at the worst possible angle, then from the architecture of a scandal that was never entirely hers alone to carry but which settled on her, somehow, more permanently than on anyone else involved. The version of her that existed in the popular imagination was a certain kind of woman, calculating, cold-blooded, the one who had been standing in the wrong place for too long and eventually been rewarded for it. She had stopped arguing with the version a long time ago. Not because it didn't hurt, it had hurt, and sometimes still did, the way an old break in a bone will remind you of itself on rainy mornings, but because arguing with it required a kind of energy that she'd found better uses for. Annabel had never held the version of her. Annabel had held the real one, the one who still had nightmares occasionally and drank her tea too strong and cried at dogs in films, and had once, at the age of 22, driven 3 hours in the wrong direction because she refused to stop and ask for help, and had ended up in a lay-by outside Wolverhampton eating a service station sandwich and laughing until she couldn't breathe. The one who had, at various points in her life, been genuinely, completely, helplessly lost. Annabel had always known where she was. The hospital was small by city standards, private, tucked back from the main road behind a hedgerow that needed trimming, the kind of place designed to feel as unlike a hospital as possible. The waiting room had actual plants, not plastic ones, and the chairs were upholstered in something that had attempted warmth even if it hadn't entirely got there. She walked in without announcement. Not secretly, her protection officers were with her, and the staff were aware, and there had been the usual quiet conversation between Dorothea and whoever managed these things on the hospital's end. But she had asked specifically, clearly, not a request that invited negotiation, that there be no fuss at the door. No photographers, no statement. Just a woman coming to see her sister. Annabel was in a room at the end of the second corridor, the one with the window that looked out onto a small walled garden where someone had planted lavender that was just beginning to come through. Pre-op. Still herself, sitting up, reading her own book, wearing the expression she always wore when she was managing something she didn't want to admit was hard. She looked up when the door opened. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Annabelle said, "You're wearing the orthopedic shoes." "My feet hurt." "They've been hurting since 2019, Camilla. At some point that stops being a phase." Camilla sat down in the chair beside the bed, pulled it close. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone who has not slept properly in a week." Annabelle set her book down. "How are you feeling?" "I've been in a car and an aeroplane and another car. I feel like I've been posted." Annabelle laughed. Not the polite kind, the real kind, the one that had blurred in photographs when they were 8 and 10, and the future was just the garden and the afternoon, and whatever came next. Camilla reached into the canvas bag and took out the cloth-wrapped bird and set it on the bedside table between them. Annabelle looked at it. "You still have that," she said, not a question. "I always have it." A silence that wasn't empty. "I made that appallingly," Annabelle said. "The head's completely wrong." "The head is fine. The head is the head of a bird that has suffered some kind of incident." "It's character," Camilla said. "Some of us have more of it than others." Annabelle looked at her sister for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes, not tears exactly, something sturdier than tears. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I know. I didn't want you to worry about." Annabelle, gentle, absolute, "I know." Silence again. "I'm glad you're here," Annabelle said. "I know that too," said Camilla. She took her sister's hand, the one without the IV line. She held it in both of hers the way you hold something you are not going to put down. Outside the window, the lavender was very still. End of part 2. The surgery took 2 hours and 11 minutes. Camilla sat in the walled garden with the lavender for most of it. Not packing, not on her phone, not doing the thing that Dorothea was doing, which was managing 4 separate streams of communication simultaneously, with the focused expression of someone keeping a dam from breaking through sheer willpower. Just sitting, on a wooden bench that was slightly damp from the morning, in the orthopedic shoes, with the canvas bag beside her and the paperback open in her lap and the words not going in at all. She had held her sister's hand until they wheeled her through the double doors, and Annabelle had made a joke, something about the surgeon's handshake being too confident. That's the kind of man who redoes his signature, which was exactly the kind of specific, quiet, entirely Annabelle thing to say. And then the doors had closed, and there had been nothing left to do but wait. She was good at waiting. She had not always been. There had been decades of her life in which waiting was a specific kind of torture, waiting for things to resolve, for things to become clear, for public opinion to move even slightly, for the version of her that existed in headlines to bear any resemblance to the one she woke up as each morning. She had learned it slowly. The way you learn anything hard, not in a moment, not from a decision, but from accumulated days of having no choice. The lavender moved in the light wind. A pigeon landed on the far wall and then thought better of it and left. She turned a page of the book she wasn't reading. At some point, a young nurse sat down on the other end of the bench. Not intrusively. Just there, taking a break, eating something wrapped in cling film with the concentrated focus of someone who had 20 minutes and intended to use all of them. She didn't acknowledge Camilla immediately. Then she looked sideways, the way people do when they're deciding whether they've recognized someone, and did the small double take, and Camilla saw the exact moment the recognition landed. "I'm sorry," the nurse said. "I didn't realize I can find somewhere else." "Please don't," Camilla said. The nurse stayed, unwrapped the rest of her lunch. A moment passed. "Someone you love?" the nurse asked. Camilla looked at the wall where the pigeon had been. "My sister," she said. Ah, a particular weight in that sound, not pity, understanding. How long? Just over 2 hours. The nurse nodded. The 2 to 3 hour ones are the worst for waiting. Long enough that you've exhausted distraction, but not long enough that you've come out the other side of it. That's very accurate. I've sat with a lot of families. She said it simply, without performance. It doesn't get easier, it just gets more familiar. Camilla looked at her. Mid-30s. The specific kind of tired that comes from shift work and genuine caring in equal measure, which is a different tired from other tires, sits differently in the face. "Do you mind if I ask what you're reading?" the nurse said. Camilla held up the cover. "Oh," the nurse said, "my dad loves that one. He's given it to everyone he's ever met." A pause. "Is it good?" "I believe it is," Camilla said. "I haven't taken in a word of it today." The nurse smiled. "That tracks." They sat together for a few minutes in the easy silence of two people who have no reason to perform anything for each other. Then the nurse's pager went off and she stood up, gathered her lunch and said, "I hope it goes well. I really do." "Thank you," Camilla said. And she meant it in the same way she'd meant it to Officer Hadley at the airport, cleanly, without ceremony, without the institutional warmth that can sometimes feel like its own kind of distance. The nurse walked back inside. The lavender moved again. The surgeon came out at 12:20. His handshake was, in fact, extremely confident. Annabel would have been vindicated. He used the words successful and textbook and excellent recovery prospects, and Camilla listened to every one of them with the focused attention of a person making sure the words are real, not just sounds. She asked 2 questions, both precise. He answered them. She thanked him. When he left, she sat back down on the damp bench. She did not cry. She wasn't that kind, not given to the releasing kind of tears that some people can do in public with a kind of grace. Hers came later, privately, usually without warning and over something adjacent to the actual thing. She would probably, in 3 days, cry at a dog in a film and know exactly why. She took out her personal mobile, typed a message to a number she'd had for longer than she'd had almost anything else in her life. "She's out, all fine, I'll call you tonight." She put the phone away. She sat with the lavender and the damp bench, and the small carved bird she'd taken back out of the bag for no reason she could have named, turning it over and over in her hands. The head still slightly wrong. The wing still slightly uneven. Made by an 8-year-old girl in a garden somewhere, overexposed English summer light doing its best. The photographs appeared 2 days later. 3 of them, taken at Heathrow by someone with a long lens and good timing, standard procedure. Nothing new. The first showed her walking through the terminal, bag in hand, protection officers flanking her. The second caught the moment of inspection at the security gate, her face 3/4 turned from the camera. The third was the one that got the most traction. It showed her at the gate, bag on the inspection table, speaking to Officer Hadley. The detail that the photographers couldn't have known, and that no one in the papers could have explained, was what she was saying in that moment. She was telling him about the bird. The headline chose itself, as headlines always do, reaching for the version of events that travels farthest, lands hardest, asks the least of whoever reads it. Royal Guards halt Camilla at the airport. What they found in her bag stunned everyone. What they found was a photograph. A letter. A paperback novel with a cracked spine. And a small wooden bird with the head at the wrong angle, carved by a little girl who gave it to her sister, because she said you're always flying off somewhere. None of that made the papers. It never does. In the Scottish borders, 3 weeks after the surgery, Annabel's garden did its extraordinary thing. The lavender came through first, then the roses, overachieving as usual, then something else small and white, and she could never remember the name of it, only that it came back every year without being asked, reliable in the way that the best things are. She was sitting in it with her 2 dogs, and a cup of tea that had gone exactly cold enough when her phone rang. Personal mobile, old number. "I need to send you something," said Camilla. "Don't argue." "What is it?" "The bird, I'm having the head fixed." Annabel laughed so hard she nearly dropped the phone. "You absolute, the head doesn't need fixing. The head is perfect." "The head is the head of a bird that has experienced significant trauma. It has character." "Some of us," said Camilla, and Annabel could hear the smile in it, the real one, the one that no one had ever managed to photograph correctly, "have more of it than others." The garden was very warm. The dogs were asleep. The tea was cold in a pleasant way. Some things don't need to be reported to be true. End of part 3. Word count, ~2, 500 words across all 3 parts.